Hello, everybody, and welcome to the official Debrief podcast. I'm so stoked today. I'm kind of a nerd, if you guys didn't know, and I have a huge passion for science fiction. And I'm so excited today because I've got three amazing authors here with me today to share with you. We're going to do a roundtable. We're going to be discussing each of these individual authors' books, and we're going to be talking about the science fiction connection to actual technology, science, and the evolution of such. So I want to welcome everybody. Say hello in the chat if you're here and you're joining us live. And if you have any questions specifically that you want to share or that you want to ask, feel free to ask those. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my first guest today. Her name is G.S. Jensen, and she is the creator of the Amaranth universe, which includes Aurora Rhapsody and Riven Worlds. G.S., welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I am G.S. Jensen. A little bit about me. I live in Colorado with my husband and my two furry dogs. Apologies in advance if they crash the party at any moment. I published my first book, Starshine, in 2014, and my 16th, Echo Rift, this January. I am a recovering corporate attorney turned recovering software developer turned very relieved science fiction writer. Like probably 75% of the people who are listening here today, my first science love when I was a teenager was Cosmos by Carl Sagan. I was actually introduced to it. My French teacher in 9th grade lent me his copy. I recently found out that after he retired from teaching French, he went on to open several used bookstores, which I thought was pretty fitting. And my first sci-fi love was Foundation by Isaac Asimov. And I've been here ever since.
Fantastic. Well, you just like whipped through my first 5 questions. So that was incredible. No, I'm teasing. That was fantastic. I appreciate you giving us the background, and I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you today. So it's great to have you. Yeah, wonderful. All right. So our next guest today is Douglas Richard. Doug is the creator of the Wired and Nick Hall series. And I would like to introduce you all to Douglas. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Fantastic. Why don't we do the same thing? Why don't you give us a quick intro and background and just tell us kind of, about your writing and how you got into it?
Yeah, so I was originally a biotechnology executive. So I have a master's in molecular biology and was a biotechnology executive. Molecular biology is like genetic engineering is kind of a more common name for it. And I did that for many, many years at Bristol Myers Squibb and some biotech companies in San Diego, where I'm from now. And then got into writing and I wrote Wired, and it hit big, and it became a bestseller, New York Times and USA Today bestseller. So I quit biotech. I was able to do that and write full time ever since, which has been great.
Wow.
San Diego with a wife and a dog, not 2 dogs, just the one.
But and both of you have been able to kind of break away from your old careers and do this full time, which has got to be a dream come true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It really, it's pretty great. So I didn't really notice the pandemic at all. Nothing changed. I was always a recluse. I'm a recluse. And
still a recluse.
The world, but I just kind of got out of bed in my pajamas and went to work.
Fantastic. Our next guest today, I'm so excited to introduce Eliza Green to you. Eliza writes the Genesis and Breeder Files series. I'm so excited to talk to you. Hello, Eliza. Welcome.
Hi. I'm so sorry, Michael. Can I just check something with you?
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of feedback on my...
Maybe do you happen to have the YouTube link open on your computer?
My mic open? No, I have just the earphones on.
Do you have the YouTube video open on another browser tab?
Let me double check that.
That'll probably do it. If that's not it, then you might just hop out and then hop back in.
Yes, we're good now.
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
I actually didn't realize. I'm so sorry. That was such a great intro, right? Nobody's going to forget that.
No, that's totally fine. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into writing sci-fi, and then maybe what you did before that.
Well, I kind of happened into it. I wasn't one of these people who, dreamed about writing from a very young age. I actually never really considered writing as a career. And it was around, I think, 2009 when I actually just decided to give writing a go. And I actually really quite enjoyed it. And I think for me, what I really loved about writing was controlling the story. When you're reading a book and you see it go a particular way, but then you really want to control that narrative. So I've always loved sci-fi. I've been a sci-fi buff for as long as I can remember, probably from, very young age. So for me, writing, it seemed like a natural extension, and it was so exciting that I kind of fell into it. And it was just something that I honed over the years. And, I published in 2012, and it just kind of took off from there. And, it's just one of those jobs that when you keep coming back to it, you feel energized getting up in the morning. And it was something that gave me something that my day job didn't give me, which is, it just, you feel very passionate about, starting every day and just living in those worlds with your characters.
Yeah, and who did you love when you were younger? What sort of sci-fi did you read?
The funny thing is I actually never read sci-fi, but my love was actually, I know, but my love was actually, it was TV shows and films, because for me, I was always much more of a visual sci-fi lover. For me, my very first film, I think, that I watched was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I really loved that. And then you had E.T. and all that kind of stuff in the 80s, and that was really fun. But for me, I think the visual really spoke to me, and it was more of my medium, because I like to see sci-fi, if you know what I mean. I like to see the tech. I like to see the creation on screen, and I didn't quite delve into the sci-fi authors as much as other people probably did, but I don't think it diminishes, for me anyway, my excitement to write it. I think it just it probably enhances it.
Right. I'm embarrassed to say a lot. I've watched a lot more sci-fi than I've read, so I totally. I think
totally it's okay though. I'm not ashamed of it. I think it's quite exciting to have both of those. It gives you two different feelings. When you're reading something, you're envisaging the story, but when you're watching something, for me, it brings it to a completely different level. I see something and I go, wow, that's amazing. It excites me in another way.
And does that influence your writing, the visuals from movies and film? Does that
very much so. Yeah, very much so. What I really enjoy about the creative process is the what if. So if I'm thinking of a story or I'm thinking of an idea, I might see something in a show or in a film, and I'll say, well, that's interesting, but what if this happened? And for me, I think when I see stuff before me, it can spark the creative juices a lot faster than if I was reading.
Right.
I mean, it's just another medium, really. It's just another way to kind of get creative. But for me, it works.
Right. How about you, GS? What is your inspiration? What is your writing process like?
I actually absolutely agree about the visualization. I have a folder of probably over 1,000 visual images. Many of them fictional spacescapes that artists have created. Also real world images. Hubble, of course. The Cassini mission was just godsend to me in terms of sheer beauty. I pick up a lot of inspiration from individual images when it comes to describing a new planet that we're visiting, or a space station, and of course spacecraft. Sometimes I will have 5 different images open on my second monitor while I'm writing a scene and trying to pulling from each one of them to create something unique. Also, I would say I am always striving to get as close as we can with the written word to the visualization that is in these images and today's films and TV shows as well.
That's fantastic. How about you, Douglas? Writing process?
Yeah, for me, I do very realistic science fiction. So I write kind of techno thrillers, or what I call near future science fiction. So it's 10, 20, 30 years in the future, always on Earth. And I explore the heck out of technologies, the good and bad. And at a very deep level. Like if I was playing chess, I think 5 moves deep rather than 1 move deep about the implications of technologies. So for me, the inspiration comes from just researching the heck out of tech. And that's getting crazy because it's exploding, as we all know. The discoveries are coming fast and furious, and they're just so mind-blowing. And that's what I try to capture in my novels. I mean, I want to give people, a lot of action and adventure and thriller tropes and twists and turns. But at the end of the day, I want them to learn a lot. And so everything I write is very accurate, as accurate as I can make it. But I also want their mind to be totally blown. I think that my fans at least really appreciate that and expect that out of me, which is a little bit challenging because, after 17 novels now, I'm trying to really figure out where the next technology that I haven't explored. So it gets a little bit harder because I think I put every great idea I've ever had into every novel. And then for the next novel, I have to start from zero. But a lot of research.
Right. So you're always having to pull that next rabbit out of the hat, as it were. I'm
constantly reading nonfiction. In fact, I almost, people ask me what I would recommend in science fiction, and I don't read science fiction anymore. I can't. I mean, after I finish a novel, I've got to reload and read, cosmology, philosophy, physics, molecular biology, just kind of continue to bring myself fully up to speed on what the possibilities are so I can kind of mine it for my next technology.
Right. And that's got to be a huge challenge. I mean, you wrote a piece recently for the Debrief about this very subject, right? How fast technology is evolving and how much there's going on. I believe it was your piece.
It was.
Yeah. Didn't want to screw that up. But I think it's important. It's an important concept, right? Because technology is evolving so fast. And you were talking about thinking, 5 moves ahead. And it's so difficult now to think 5 moves ahead because of the exponential rate of growth. But you also mentioned that you really try to have some twists in your books. Your book, Split Second, was hailed as having a stunningly original twist on time travel. Without ruining the book for readers who will want to check it out, can you give us a hint or a clue as to where that twist came from, or kind of give us an idea of what it is?
It's going to be difficult, but so I set out because there's thousands and thousands. I mean, time travel is huge, right? Romance, historical time travel, all kinds of time travel. It's being done to death, and it's a great. People love it. What if you could, win the lottery, change, how you said something bad to your girlfriend and she left you, how you could change that event, that sort of thing. So it captures the imagination quite a lot. But there's been so much in TV and movies and books over 100 years. And so I set out to write something original. So I read 2 or 3 books on the science of time travel, and there are now full books by scientists trying to figure out, is there a way to really do time travel? And then I read anthologies, thousands of pages of time travel stories to try to figure out, can I come up with something totally unique? And I was able to do it. And so I won't tell you how, because you have to read the thing. And I mean, nothing I can say will not spoil it. But the idea is that this guy figures out how to send things back like 1/1,000,000th of a second, basically. I think it's maybe 45 millionths of a second. And so what good is that? And the answer is it's it's epically important. It changes everything. It's more important than you can possibly imagine, but why? And that's really kind of the mystery of it. And then I explain, and that's really kind of the big reveal, is why is that? Why would that matter? You don't have enough time to change an event, to win a lottery. It's the less than a blink of an eye, far less. And so, but it has epic implications. So that's kind of the reveal.
Oh, that's fascinating. So I know from a physicist perspective, it's been postulated or hypothesized that time travel into the future seems more likely than time travel into the past. What did you dig up with all these conversations? Can we do both? What's the deal?
And I don't want to monopolize this whole roundtable thing, but let me, I'll try to talk quick so we can bring these other women in. But but what was the question again? Remind me.
Can we time travel?
Yeah, can we time travel? Yeah. So, look, I think that it's definitely a possibility. I think that if physics allows it, we'll maybe someday figure it out. And that brings me to a point that I wanted to make, which is when I write, a lot of times I think this is way too far out. Nobody's going to believe this could ever be possible. I think I've gone too far, right? And what I always remember is when I was a molecular biologist, so I did DNA sequencing 35 years ago. When I did it 35 years ago, I did like 500 base pairs. It took me a week to sequence 500. You know, you had a little light box. You had like a barcode that you finish with your chemical reactions. You sit down and you call out to a friend, A, G, C, T, and he would write it down. You know, while you're kind of looking at it on the film light box. And if you would have asked me 35 years ago, when will we be able to sequence 1 billion base pairs in an hour? 1 billion base pairs in an hour. I was doing 500 base pairs in a week. I would have said never. I would have said it's like the speed of light. It's inviolate. Physics will not allow it. Okay. I would have bet my life that in 1 million years we could not sequence 1 billion base pairs in an hour, and we're doing it. Illumina in 2017 announced they could do 1 billion base pairs in an hour. So so that always kind of sticks in my mind as nothing is really too far out.
Right.
Imagine it, and there's some possibility. And then the second thing I read a lot about, when I did a novel on nanotechnology recently. Little nanobots, microscopic, and they can build everything from atoms up, like Legos, right? And they can transform matter, change atoms to different, do kind of alchemy, and build anything instantly. And you think, well, that's impossible, right? We're never going to be able to do that. But you think about the miracle of human birth, or any kind of birth. And that was my favorite course in graduate school, developmental biology. How does a sperm and an egg meet? And that's one cell. And then it becomes an entire human being. I mean, how does that one cell, all right, first it has to divide, it has to gather things from the environment and make exact copies of itself. And then at some point, this group of cells some cells say, I'm going to become eye cells, and I'm going to become brain cells. And then it's 100 billion brain cells, all from one cell. And human being and consciousness arises. And then once you're born, you've got to continue to convert food into more of yourself so you can grow. So, we're taking apples and cotton candy and making more human being. And so when you really compare the two, nanotechnology, building a computer from a pit of sand with a nanobot in an hour is really not that much more incredible than the process of human birth. Okay, so I'll stop now and let somebody else jump.
No, that's fascinating, and I think you're right. I think there's such a huge opportunity here for us to utilize the processes of life to understand what are the potentials of technology. So I think that's really astute point. GS, some of your work deals with exotic alien life, AIs, wormholes, indestructible starships, and the promise of immortality. Can you give us an example of exotic alien life from your work, and then what do you think the reality is of potential alien life? Do you see it as being incredibly exotic, or do you think it's similar to forms of life we have here on Earth?
Well, to answer the last question first, I think that it's almost certain that it exists. I mean, the vastness of the universe, not to go off on a Douglas Adams quote, but it's really vast. And the possibility that there's not any other intelligent life out there is simply, so small as to be zero.
Right.
I suspect from our limited perspective today, it looks as if most alien life would, if not look like us, at least be recognizable to us, carbon-based life, obviously. You look at the incredible variety of life that is on Earth, and it's all has so much in common with each other. Limbs, skin, organs, blood, brains, that type of thing. Is that likely the most common, life to arise out there in the universe? Probably. But again, the universe is so vast that I would absolutely not rule out silicon-based life, immaterial life. That certainly, in my books, there are several races who are ethereal, for lack of a better word. They are the cosmos and can, dash around. They're not limited by materiality.
Right.
And physical substances and that type of thing. I think that the universe is big enough to allow for the possibility to arise here and there for anything that we can conceive of, and then probably a lot of things that we have not been able to yet.
Yeah, I imagine that the human imagination is quite limited in that, even though, the folks who are sharing this stage you guys are literally at the frontier of human imagination. But I imagine even stretching ourselves to the limits, it's very difficult to comprehend what the potential other forms and variations of life are, life and non-life in the universe that we have. That's fantastic. Eliza, tell me a little bit about, so your book, Genesis Lie, includes a concept of the government keeping the truth from the people. You may be aware that there's some mainstream media, that a lot of news breaking about these ideas of UAPs and UFOs, and it's gaining mainstream significance. Do you think, was this idea spawned from a thought you had about whether or not the governments of the world are keeping this sort of information from people?
Well, the original idea actually stemmed from the series itself, stemmed from a short story idea I had, which was in the first book, there's an interaction between an alien and a human. It was a young boy. And then my original idea was that if an alien and a human met, what would they actually say to each other? And so when it actually became, when the idea was developed more, then obviously the idea of the governmental control came into it, and I think it is quite quite significant in this day. And if you look at a lot of sci-fi, you'll actually see there's an overtone of control within a lot of the sci-fi stories. There's dystopian is complete control. Even utopian societies have control because there's usually an exclusion factor. There's a control on information of what people get. There's monitoring data. There's monitoring people's movements. There's technology. Facial recognition, we have that now, but I mean, when you're looking, it's hard not to actually include that kind of idea in any sort of story, because it's happening now. So while the story itself, while the idea of the Genesis series started out with the interaction between this human and this alien, it did kind of blow into a lot of a bigger conspiracy almost. It was there was more behind the interaction than just two people or two species meeting and then seeing what that conversation would be. It was a whole, my story is a whole idea behind that, and it does come down, the core of what I've written about does come down to a governmental type control. And, the interaction perhaps wasn't an accident. It was controlled. It was something that was orchestrated almost and expected. And, while it looked like an accident on the surface, it may not have been, and it's hard, as I said, it's hard not to actually have that element of control from any situation, and especially in sci-fi. It's where a lot of people see the world going. It's not just that it's going to be, it's not that we're all going to live harmoniously and we're all going to live fantastic lives. No, what we're doing at the moment even is we're just giving over a lot more control of what we do. We're online, we're on our phones, we're signing up for everything online. It's all ingrained into society as is. So I suppose it's very easy then just to write a story that develops on that idea and just takes the worst of it, I suppose. And that's what the idea is it's taking the worst of control and blowing it up into a pretty much doomsday experience. And then you're looking at that doomsday experience and then you're saying, well, how do we get out of this? Because we've created it, so how do we actually fix it? So
that's fascinating. So obviously a lot of your work is dystopian. So do you think that science and technology is creating a world that is more dystopian rather than utopian? Is technology and science improving people's lives, or is it actually harming our lives?
It's a double-edged sword, because, if I'm looking at science, obviously, you've got certain things that actually work better with technology than don't. And one of the things I think I talked about in the article that I did for you was medicine. So we've got, you've got important developments in medicine. You've got sentient programming that can work out solutions faster than humans can. And, you know, those kind of things are really important, because we can't dismiss technology as being just the bad. It's got a lot of very good uses in current life and in the future as well. I don't know if the world is quite going as will go as dystopian as we think it will. I mean, certainly with the pandemic that we're seeing at the moment, I think a lot of people felt like we'd be in a much worse position perhaps than we were, and that, you know, at the beginning of it, a lot of people write post-apocalyptic, and it's usually, you know, barren wasteland, and it's you know, everyone's fighting for their lives, and this virus has changed half the population into zombies, and people have to fight for their lives. But the truth of the matter is we were all pretty calm, you know, as far as you could be calm in this scenario, but we were all pretty calm, and the world didn't fall apart like we expected it to, or some people perhaps.
Yeah, well, I definitely have friends who are a little disappointed in it, because they wanted a zombie apocalypse, and this is pretty darn boring.
That's the thing. Real life is boring. So, I mean, the whole point of sci-fi is it's so exciting, because you can create these crazy worlds, and you can actually make, I mean, for me, dystopian it's taking the worst of society and exploring that, because I don't know if you can get much lower than a dystopian environment. That just means everything's going wrong, and nothing, you know, your utopian is your goal, but whoever utopian societies, if you ever had one existing, would also have problems within that. You couldn't possibly say that utopian is perfect. I'm sure there's plenty of things that could go wrong, but yeah, I mean, yeah, as I said, like, we're taking the worst of situations and creating content out of it. But in real life, yeah, things are a little bit more day to day and boring. So,
right. So do you guys find it, and maybe we'll start with you, GS, do you guys find it difficult to write sci-fi as technology and science evolve so quickly now? I mean, obviously things like Moore's law continue to perpetuate the computing power that allows for the transformation of these processes. AI, you know, continues to get more intelligent by the day. Are these things helping you write sci-fi, or is it making it more difficult?
Yes and no. I take inspiration from every single new technological advancement, scientific discovery, space mission. You know, I really do. Most of my news feed is science and tech related, because I'm always plumbing them for ideas, and I get excited about every new one. I really do. At the same time, so my series starts 300 years in the future, and I thought that was enough time to allow for us to figure out the hard things: FTL travel, artificial intelligence, cybernetics, artificial gravity, quantum communication, all of that. But it feels like not a month goes by which there's an article that someone is making a big advancement in an area that was just happening in my books or had just been developed. Literally earlier this week, a reader sent me an article talking about a team that had made the first functioning qubit quantum computer. And for anybody who doesn't know, a qubit, as opposed to a qubit, can hold a superposition of any point between 0 and 2, instead of between 0 and 1. So that's a tripling of the exponential power available, and it's a huge advance. Obviously, this is a small test, you know, very, very tiny exploration proof of concept. But in my books, I actually treated the advent of working functional putrid artificial intelligence as the thing that created true artificial sentience. But in my timeline, this didn't happen for 150 years from now. And if it's now going to happen in the next decade, then where on earth are we going to go from there? So,
yeah, this concept fascinates me, and I don't think people realize how fast the future is coming upon us. And I think this speaks to Kurzweil's singularity, this technological singularity idea that, you know, as these things multiply and exponentially explode so quickly between AI and quantum computing, it's very difficult to see where we're headed and how quickly. How are you dealing with this, Douglas, in your books?
Yeah, let me, if you don't mind, I'd love to go back really quickly and just hit the post-apocalyptic thing.
Sure.
Rush ahead. My novels tend to be very optimistic, and I avoid the post-apocalyptic genre. I know it's super popular, but I'm kind of more of the Star Trek vein, where it's a bright new future that has a lot of promise. Not that there aren't a lot of issues, but I think part of the problem that we're facing in our world, and I've written about this a lot in my novels, and I should write a piece for your site about this, that things are far better in every area you look at in human endeavor: lifespan, education, racism, poverty. It's ridiculously better than it was 50 years ago. I mean, ridiculously better in every single, but all we focus on is the negative. So, when you poll people, they think it's the opposite. They think the world is worse in every single regard, that we're more racist, that we're, more percentage of the world's in poverty, that we're less educated. I mean, honestly, around the world, I've read whole books on this. If you poll,
yes, I think Steven Pinker wrote a whole book on this, right?
Exactly right. And then there's a book called, I'm not going to remember, but
Abundance, maybe.
Yeah, there is another. There's like three.
Right.
But the point is that I think the 24/7 news media and the internet, where people can only get, they want to get eyeballs and they want to get clicks, and so in order to do that, they have to focus on the negative. And as a species, we've evolved to focus on the negative, right? I mean, we're the only ones aware of our own mortality. We're anxious as a species, and anxiety sells because in the tundra, if you're walking around the savannah and you see the grass rustle, it could either be the wind or it could be a lion. Okay. Right. So you want to, if you are optimistic and say, oh, it's just the wind, and you're wrong, you're dead.
You're dead.
Okay. Yeah. But if you, so it's better to be pessimistic, right? It's better to fear that it's a lion and then, ahead. And so we're just an anxious species. And I fear that social media and the 24/7 news cycle is feeding into that like crazy. And so we're a species now who have it better than ever, and we're convinced that it's worse than ever. And I think that's really poisonous and is a problem. But just to move on, I believe science can solve just about anything. And I think that the media doesn't really focus on that. In 1870, I write a lot about this because I think it's a fascinating story. In 1870, major cities around the world were panicked about the horse manure problem. They had so many horses that New York did an analysis and decided that if they didn't do something about the horse problem, in 50 years, the entire city would be knee-deep in horse manure. All of Manhattan, knee-deep in horse manure. And in fact, in the 1870s, every street was covered. Maybe it wasn't knee-deep, but it was an inch or two of horse manure. I mean, hundreds of thousands of horses, what are they going to do? It's an unsolvable problem. They were scratching their heads. Okay, 50 years later, of course, they never counted on the automobile. Okay, 50 years later, it was laughable that this would ever be a problem. And I think a lot of the things that we focus on as being huge issues, 50 years from now, we're going to look back and laugh at it. Like, I can't believe these people really worried about X, Y, or Z. They had no foresight. As smart as we think we are, as imaginative as we think we are, as futurists, I think we get it wrong. I mean, you look back at Asimov, and I agree with GS that Asimov is my favorite author. And in the Foundation trilogy, he posits, spacefaring civilization, faster than light travel, galactic colonization, but he's going to do a big initiative of creating something called the Encyclopedia Galactica. Okay, it's going to be an encyclopedia of all human knowledge that we're going to preserve. Okay, and when I was reading as a kid, like, oh my God, what a cool idea. Okay, but the thing that science and futurists missed was the internet. There's some cyber stuff, that happened, but in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, I was reading every science fiction book that came out. Nobody thought of the internet. I mean, here's Asimov thinking of spacefaring civilizations, faster than light travel, but he's thinking about an old-fashioned encyclopedia.
Right.
And now we have something that nobody could have fathomed, where you can instantly search through trillions of pages. And in fact, it's content provided by billions of humans. That's the thing that's amazing. It used to be that, there was a handful of people who would provide content for the rest of the world. Now, every single person in the world creates content for everybody else. So you have trillions of pages that are instantly searchable. You can check the weather. You can watch video. I mean, Asimov's mind would have exploded if you would have, and nobody predicted it. So there's so much. There's going to be huge revolution that we haven't even scratched the surface of. going forward.
That's such a fantastic point about the horse manure in New York City and our inability to understand the evolution of science and technology, to understand what's coming down the road prior to us getting there. What else do you think, Eliza? What are your thoughts on and have you thought about this? What sort of technology that we're not even paying attention to could actually paint the picture for the future?
Oh God, that's a loaded question. I'm not sure I'm prepared for that one. Well, I mean, there's so many things. It's hard because, you know, when we've seen, there's so many ideas out there. There's so many things that are actually being presented. And, you know, I think for me, when you see a lot of the ideas in books and in films and in TV shows, there's an element of that already happening somewhere. Somebody's already thought of it because it's an extension of an idea that already exists. So I'm wondering, I mean, I think personally, I'd like to see more done with AI. I think it started. I think it needs to be pushed a lot more. It's a little bit slow. I think people fear the unknown, and that tends to hold up a lot of advancements. I think there could definitely be more drive with that kind of thing, because there's so many things we haven't done with it. We were only at the beginning of a lot of things. What we've had in the last 50 years has been, I would think, quite basic. In the last maybe 10, 15 years, we've seen huge advancements, but now we're seeing really nothing at all. If you think of a smartphone, for example, I mean, the first iPhone came out in 2007, and I think it was 2007. And so that was amazing. Nobody even, you know, the touch screen and everything, that was a brand new concept. And now we all look at it and it's like, yeah, so what? So I think, like, where do you go from there? Are we at the peak of our ability right now to think beyond what we've got in store? And maybe the other, as I'm talking here, I'm thinking of other things now. So another thing I think could be just where we're using a lot of substances that in building and in outerwear or whatever we're using it for. There's a lot of substances out there that haven't been discovered, or that could either make things more lightweight, could make things stronger. There's a lot of things, like, you know, they're using several materials, different materials in rocket ship design. I mean, that's probably where the future is going now, is looking at space exploration. Maybe we've tapped out what we can do here right now, and that's why we're looking more at SpaceX, and we're looking at other companies that are really getting in and doing interesting things. So maybe the future isn't. I would like to see more AI, but I think also it's maybe the materials that we're looking at, that the way we continue to mine a lot of raw materials. Maybe there's better ways to utilize those materials, and graphene is one example. It's very lightweight. It can be used in multiple scenarios, and it could end up making certain products cheaper, more lightweight, more usable, etc. I'm kind of.
Yeah, no.
I know there's other things, but I mean, certainly off the top of my head, I think those are probably the two that we're mostly focusing on at the moment.
Right. And I think it's fascinating because, you know, you've got so many of these folks who are, you know, they look at current day rocket propulsion and they go, we've been doing that since the 60s. It's like, well, but could they land the thing in the 60s? Like, the ability to take a rocket into the air and then land it, stick that landing, is a pretty powerful thing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Douglas, you had a point?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to circle back. I never did get to the point you were asking about in my last monologue. So I wanted to just briefly, a couple minutes, talk about, you know, talk about far future, and, you know, does that make writing science fiction harder, and you know, you talked about Kurzweil, so I wanted to kind of mention business. So Kurzweil, that blew my mind when I read The Singularity is Near years ago, and changed how I think about far future science fiction. So I always, you know, thought Captain Kirk was going to be Captain Kirk. You know, he was going to be a womanizer, and he was going to, you know, sleep with aliens, androids, whatever, and swashbuckler, right? But you know, the reality is that, you know, based on everything we know, based on how fast exponential growth occurs, right? You double a penny And in the first day, you only have a penny. Then you double it again. You have 4, then 8, and it starts super slow. It's like a hockey stick. It's almost touching the ground for a long time, but then it just explodes, right? And in less than a month, you have over $1 million starting from a penny. And so Kurzweil was saying, look, not only we experience exponential growth. Like I said, I did 500 base pair sequencing 35 years ago. Now it's 1 billion in an hour. Okay, so that's the kind of the growth we're seeing with Moore's law, with everything. And eventually we're going to get there. And so does anybody doubt in 50 years that our computers are going to be unrecognizable? And if they can be self-evolving, then they get to kind of a godhead, an omniscience almost, where the runaway evolution of our computers. Well, what if we figure out how to runaway evolve our own brains, or we have a brain-computer interface? And so the idea is that at some point, and Kurzweil predicts it's going to be super soon, much faster than anybody would realize, but certainly within 200 or 300 years, we're going to reach this. We're going to evolve to a singularity point, and in his definition, singularity is basically kind of where we become God almost. I mean, there's such an explosion of capability in our brains or in our AI that we're omniscient. Okay, and if that's the case, and I actually believe that. I mean, based on his logic, and you have to read the book. It's about 700 pages. So based on his logic, you kind of. Because you got it back. I've become convinced that it's very possible. If you believe that, it's hard to write far future science fiction, and because will we really be humans? I mean, and how do you write a godlike omniscient species? You want people that are relatable. You want characters that are James Kirk, swashbucklers, or just normal human beings with better technology trappings. And I'm not sure that that's the reality. Now, of course, it's important to suspend disbelief. I love that stuff. I love Star Trek. So, but the reality, I think, is hopefully going to be far different.
Right. And it just reminds me of, like, you think of the original 1967 Star Trek, like the original Enterprise, and inside, and they've got all these giant buttons and like screens and stuff. And it's like, why wouldn't they have solid state technology? Why wouldn't they have computer brain interfaces that they're able to instantly communicate with the machine?
Right.
Like these are the things that I think you don't think about until it really comes and hits you in the head. GS, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the singularity, on the evolution of this sort of technology?
I agree with Douglas. I think that it is an inevitability. I could go grab my copy of The Singularity is Near if needed, and flip to a tab page. But and it does make writing far future sci-fi very difficult. I think that that's probably true. In a couple of 100 years, we may not recognize ourselves. But the thing about fiction is it is there to entertain, and the most important factor in entertaining is relatable characters. And so, I mean, I had to make the choice to make my characters still fundamentally human.
Right.
As the technology explodes around them. And in my series, like I said, it starts 300 years from now, but humanity is forced into what I call a soft singularity in order to meet a grave threat to their existence. They unshackle their AIs. They push their cybernetics through several levels of advancement so they can stay on par with the AIs. They leap into the universe and all its aliens. But most of them do still remain fundamentally human. And I think that's a storyteller's choice,
right,
in order to tell a great story, something that captivates people. Reality may, in fact, end up looking very different.
Yeah.
Right. That's a really interesting and powerful point I think you make about the storyteller's poetic license and how important it is to be able to communicate ideas through stories. That is literally the only way human beings got to where we are today, is through storytelling. I'm curious though, what are your thoughts on this idea? I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm just going to mute Douglas. It might be your note. I'm not sure. Anyway, so this idea that Elon Musk has, because he's been warning people about AI for a very long time, and he's been saying, it's the potential for a super AI to take over. Derek just said it, I think, very well here in the chat. I think the AI will get tired of lugging around the slowly adapting meat and just leave us behind. The idea that Musk has with Neuralink, though, is to utilize the brain interface, the brain computer interface, as sort of a, if you can't beat them, join them.
Absolutely.
What are your guys' thoughts on that?
No,
Go ahead,
I agree that that is the way. And I think that is why Musk has founded Neuralink. Another company, Kernel, founded by Brian Johnson, is pursuing very similar goals, and I know that there are several other out there. The pace of artificial intelligence growth right now is impressive, but it's not exponential. I think if we can focus enough resources on that type of research, brain-computer interfaces, enhancing ourselves with the same technology that we're using to enhance computers and artificial intelligence, then we stand a much better chance. I think maybe it's a rosy scenario, but I'm an optimist, and so I hope this is the way it goes, that we and our computers will evolve alongside each other, symbiotically, even, if we get everything right, if we stumble our way towards that. But from where our technology is right now, I actually think that's a pretty plausible future scenario. I think we can keep up.
Right. I don't know how many of you are Battlestar Galactica fans, but it's always interesting when you think about, all right, good. Not just me.
Of course.
I find it fascinating, this idea as they developed their AI, that the AI eventually longed for the things that humans have, the ability to love, the ability to connect, to feel. Douglas, I know you had your hand up, so I didn't mean to pull that away from you, but go ahead. Either respond to that or whatever you were responding to with GS.
So in terms of this Neuralink thing, about 7 or 8 years ago, I read this book called Mind's Eye, which really had a guy waking up in a dumpster. Everybody's trying to kill him, and he realizes he can read minds, and he can surf the web of his thoughts. And he later finds out he's got electronics implanted in his brain that allow him to do that. People are, telepathy. There's a lot of work being done where people can control game cursors with their brains. They can control a keyboard with their brains. That's actually being done. So, it's not too far off. But and then Neuralink came along years later. So Elon, thank you for stealing my. No, he.
We're giving the ideas away.
Yeah, right. But the whole point of it is that like I say, I analyze the heck out of technology, the pros and the cons, and certainly the pros of having a computer in your brain, let's say, where you can instantly access any information. It would be you have smart contact lenses, so maybe holographically it's floating in front of your eyes. Any information you need access to, you can call for an Uber while you're walking down the street, just in your brain, your thoughts. And so it sounds like really magnificent, and it is, right? It's totally hands-free. But then human nature always gets in the way of first off, you wouldn't want to read minds because that would be horrific. You don't really want to know what people are thinking. When you're walking in a mall and everybody's saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe what that guy's wearing." Doesn't he have any fashion sense? Whatever. You'd hear a lot of negativity that you won't want to hear. But beyond that, we're addicted to the internet. I mean, they can't have a meal anymore without being on their phone. They can't. Right. Especially our kids' generation, they're so superficial in their thinking. And there's books being written about this that I cited in the novel. One is called The Shallows, which talks about what the effect that the internet is having on human brains, especially the kid generation. They can't think deeply about anything. They're like dogs chasing cars. They skim the surface of everything because the internet allows you to do that. And so there's a real danger in how we would be rewiring kind of our own cognitive processes, relying too much on it. And then the addictive potential. I mean, can you imagine if you could watch movies in your mind's eye? It's connected to your auditory and visual cortex, right? And you could watch movies in your mind's eye. You could be on a date and texting somebody, and you wouldn't have to be on your phone. Nobody would even know. So you could be crashing because you'd be, how many people crash because they're texting and driving? What if you could do it in your mind? So I mean, there's issues with everything, and I think it all comes back to human nature. Our technology is greatly exceeding, kind of our psychology. Human foibles are going to remain for a long, long time. I mean, we're still primitive apes for the most part, and now we're given all this wonder technology, and it's having some negative effects on the species.
Yeah, I mean, you look at addiction. Yeah, you look at mental illness, depression, addiction. I mean, the human psychology was not built for modern life. And so the question is, and it's not evolving at the speed at which our technology is evolving. So the question is, can we use technology to speed up the evolution of our brain? And we could dig deeply into that question, or we could talk a little bit about in our final 10 minutes, how science fiction throughout history and even now with your generation of writers is creating the narrative for the technological evolution that we're seeing. To what extent does art reflect life, and to what extent does life reflect art in this science fiction genre? Eliza, what are your thoughts?
I think, you know, like when you read a lot of sci-fi, I mean, the older sci-fi, there's some ideas in there that you think they were very new for the era. But like I've said before, any ideas that sci-fi create usually come from another idea that's already been in existence. Somebody seeded that idea in something, and then a sci-fi writer has come and taken that idea and moved with it. So for ideas to exist in sci-fi, for me anyway, and I'm sure for others, I mean, we all do our research, we all check, we all read multiple articles on science itself, and that drives our ideas, our plots, or what our characters are going to be doing. So for anything to exist in the sci-fi world, it needs to be in real life, because it has to be science. It's based on fact. It's not fantasy.
Right.
So, you know, there needs to be an element of truth in what you're writing, and it needs to be backed up by science. And you take the idea and then you extrapolate it out to 100 or 200 or 300 years, and you say, well, if we had this idea, what can we do with it? How can we shape it into something else? And, you know, I'm thinking about Star Trek, any of the Star Treks, really, actually, probably the Next Generation, one of the great shows that was on TV. One of the ideas that one of the things that they pushed was the touch the consoles. So right. The touch consoles. But my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding was a lot of that technology was already being used in NASA. And so it was something that was already in existence, and then it was taken into a science fiction environment, and it was made into something else. So I think there's a great correlation between what writers write about and what's already happening, and maybe the ideas that the sci-fi writers dream up and come up with, maybe that's something that somebody else can take and then move that on a stage. Maybe there's something I'm writing about that, somebody else might see it and say, God, you know what, that's a great idea. I'm going to run with this idea. So it's all interconnected, I think.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point. It's not a point I've considered before, is the idea that a lot of times science fiction writers, they're probably more well-read on current technology or experimental technology than the average person, and then they're transforming that into a story, and then they're sharing that, and people are going, oh my God, they're ahead of their time, and then because they see something come out 5 years later, when in fact that it may have been more correlative or more simultaneous than the reader would have imagined. GS, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a very symbiotic relationship with a mostly positive feedback loop. I challenge you to find a rocket scientist or a computer programmer who did not love sci-fi when they were young. Many of them still love it today, even if they won't admit it in public. Elon Musk is infamous for being a geek, and you can't say that much of what he is attempting to do and successfully doing now does not come from his love of sci-fi books and films and video games and everything.
Right.
I think, but at the same time, yes, we keep seeing our science fiction become science fact out there in the world. And then we see stories about new discoveries and new research, and that inspires us to write about that. And, the cycle continues. It's a very positive feedback loop.
Right. What are your thoughts, Douglas?
No, I agree with GS that, it's both. I mean, scientists are inspired by science fiction, and science fiction writers are inspired by scientists. I mean, I used to speak at schools. I did a kids series that had, the teachers liked because it talked about the scientific method and, accurate science, and the science teachers used to teach it. And I would do, big, meeting rooms full of kids and talk about, how science fiction has inspired scientists. And, notable examples, the cell phone, that came from Star Trek. I mean, the guy at Motorola who invented it.
The flip phone?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's a cell phone at all. I mean, just, not having it. When I was a kid, for the younger people out here, I mean, we had a phone that was hooked to a wall, like a 6-foot extension cord. If you're talking to somebody on the phone, you have you're tied to the wall, right? You can't even go outside. But anyway, cell phone and also the MP3 player was from Star Trek: The Next Generation, which Eliza mentioned. when they were asking for music, they would just ask the computer for music, and it would so that.
You could make the Siri argument as well.
Yeah, there's countless examples where science fiction has inspired science developments, and it continues to do so. I mean, if you look at when what's his name, Nolan, was trying to do Inception, and he was thinking about wormholes. He went to physicists, Nobel Prize winning physicists, and said, can you work on this and come up with scientific rationale for this stuff? And they came up with new ideas. So I think a lot of when I read these books on time travel was definitely a science fictional concept. And now scientists who love science fiction are examining, exploring it. Can we really do this? Is there any merit to it? Is there any possible way we could do this? So as Gia said, I think it's a kind of a mutual feedback loop that I think is propelling everybody forward.
Fantastic. Are you guys keeping up with some of the mainstream breaking news on UFOs and UAPs? If so, what are your thoughts on this phenomenon?
No.
Sorry,
I'm keeping up.
I always forget to call someone out in a panel discussion. Douglas, go right ahead.
No, I'm keeping up. I'm fascinated by it. I thought these people, I always thought, nah, this isn't real. I mean, why? But now it's becoming like Michio Kaku, who's a science popularizer. I saw him on TV, and he was basically saying, it used to be that you were kind of a nut if you believed it. Now you're a nut if you don't believe it. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming right now. The government's coming out confessing, there's stuff we can't explain. They're showing videos of stuff that defies physics. And there's a lot of it. And if you really look into it, I mean, I was as skeptical as anybody ever. Okay, that this is real. I mean, I want it to be real. Skeptical. So then what the heck is going on? I mean, why don't they land at the White House? I mean, if they want to be found, they should be found. If they want to be hidden, if they have the technology to go from another planet to ours across, trillions of miles of empty space, they have the technology to be stealthy and remain hidden. So what are they just playing around? Are they kids on a joyride buzzing us? Who knows what's really going on? But it's fascinating, and I write a lot about my last 3 or 4 novels have talked about alien artifacts or this whole concept because I'm intrigued by it.
I like Douglas, I always assumed that UFO people were just crazies. I mean, like I said, I do believe that there's intelligent life out there, but I don't believe that they're coming here and dissecting our cows.
Yeah.
But then I actually went and wrote in my book where the government involved monitors and studies primitive species that they come across, so they'll know when they advance enough to be contacted, sort of like the Vulcans in Star Trek, or if they are becoming a violent problem. And honestly, it's actually a pretty reasonable idea that more advanced species would passively monitor less advanced species to keep an eye on them. So maybe that is happening.
Well, it's
but
interesting.
Why do they get caught, Jess? Why are they getting caught? I mean, why are they not good enough to remain hidden?
Right.
I have an idea.
Valid question.
I'm not a sci-fi writer, but I have an idea, and Eliza, I'll turn it over to you right after this. But my thought is, what if they are utilizing AI and they're sending their AI across galaxies that can take 10,000 years, and by the time it gets here, you have some interesting phenomena where maybe this AI is doing some weird stuff and it makes a mistake or it makes a miscalculation and it's getting caught, and so it's not supposed to get caught, but maybe it's making a mistake or two. What are your thoughts, Eliza?
Well, I think I'm listening to you talking about the UFOs, and I think it's much more. It's not as discussed as much here in Ireland. We don't really follow a lot of the UFO stuff, but here's my opinion on whether aliens are out there. I would like for them to be out there because I'd like to think that we're not the only species in this entire galaxy, and that maybe there's more intelligent life than us that can teach us how to be better humans. Sorry, I went off track there, but
sorry, I should warn you guys, when I put the comments on the screen, you don't have to look at them. It's just to make sure everybody.
Oh no, that's fine. No. Just remind me of your question again, Michael, if you don't mind.
Yeah, are aliens real?
That's a good simple question. Yes.
So my actual question was that we're seeing so many more leaks and information coming out, and I've always wanted to believe, but I've always been kind of skeptical myself.
Yeah.
But the more I see coming out in the media, and the more stories I hear, the more I'm going, what is really going on here? And yes, we do have evolving drone technology, but there are things that we're seeing that we can't identify as drones. So I was just curious what your thoughts on that was as a sci-fi writer.
I would love further, the idea of alien life visiting our planet is probably a scary concept for the majority of people, but I would love to know whether there's actually alien life out there. I don't think they'll be turning up in ships necessarily, because I think if they had ships, they would have been here a lot longer than 2021. They would have been here probably 100, 1,000 years ago. Who knows? Maybe, but. Alien life, maybe it's hard to say what are people seeing. It's hard to actually say what that is. Is that really alien life, or is it just something that we haven't? I mean, what are UFOs? Unexplained flying objects. So it's just something that we haven't seen before, because we've talked a lot about technology on the show, and there's a lot of technology out there that perhaps nobody's ever seen, so we can't explain it. So is it something that we've created, or is it something that's coming from an outside source? But then also, how much of the universe have we explored? How much of space have we explored? How big is space? Is it infinite? Is how far? If there was alien life, would we even see it in our lifetime? Maybe we need to wait 1,000 years for us to actually see a ship turn up, and I can't remember which film it was. Was it War of the Worlds or one of those? I'm not sure, but the aliens came, and they came down in their ships, and they battled for days, weeks, months, and the one thing that killed them was our germs, the common cold. So that could be the end of it.
Such a brilliant concept. And and what do we know about quantum mechanics? What do we know about string theory? What do we know about multiple dimensions? You could just go on this path for days, because there's so much we don't understand. But I do appreciate the fact that we can look at these things with an open mind and a skeptical mind simultaneously. I think that's really important. You guys have been phenomenal. I think we should do this again soon, because this has been an absolute blast. I need to hang out with my geeks more often, because this is fantastic.
Absolutely.
It sounds great.
Yeah. GS, can you tell us where people can find your books, and then we'll just kind of go around the circle here, so we make sure everybody can go find your books, where you're on social media, and then and I'd love to invite you guys back for another conversation in the future.
My website is Jennsen. That's JENNSEN.com. And it has everything that you need to get started right there. I'm also very active on Facebook and on Twitter, and somewhat active on Instagram. And I am GS Jennsen on all three.
Fantastic. GS, thank you so much for joining us today. It was truly a pleasure. Make sure you go check her out, find her on Twitter, and read her books. GS, have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. All right, Douglas, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm at www. I don't think I need that anymore. Douglas, I always have the E in the middle. DouglasERichards.com. Friend me on Facebook at Douglas E. Richards Author. So it's not a fan page. It's a normal page, Douglas E. Richards Author. And then you can write to me if you ever read any of my novels and you want to write. I post my email everywhere. So if you're on Amazon and you're looking at the synopsis of my book, at the bottom, it's my email is DouglasERichards1@gmail.com. And I always reply to everybody, even in the occasional hate mail that I get. I always reply. Not that there's much of that.
I'm curious what kind of hate mail you get.
I wrote about this in some of the notes. I write notes about what's accurate and what's not in my novels. It's too long of a story, but it's rare. It's very, very rare. But I think a guy was drunk, pretty drunk, and he. Anyway, but I respond to everybody. And I turned him around, by the way, when I replied, he apologized and said, I think I messed this up. So awesome. It's good policy, I guess.
Yeah. Douglas, it was a pleasure. I hope to have you back soon.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. Eliza, how can folks find you?
So I'm quite easy. I'm ElizaGreenBooks.com. That's my website. And I've kept that tag for Twitter and for Facebook as well. So that's how people can find me. my series, I've got 2 series. My Genesis series is about human obsession with evolution and their pursuit of betterment of themselves and the environment around them. And my Breeder File series is mostly, it's about AI and basically the good and bad of AI and what we should and shouldn't be doing with it. And when we give AI feelings and emotions, do they become better than us, or do they become worse? Are they our allies, or are they, not?
That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that. And Eliza, I hope you'll come back and see us soon.
Oh, I will, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. It's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining the official Debrief podcast today. What a thrill it was to speak with these authors, just incredible minds. And I strongly encourage you to go check out their books, follow them on social media, because these are the folks that are literally writing the future. If you have comments, ideas, things that you want to add to the debrief, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at @SingularityMike. And you can also direct message me there if you have ideas for the show. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.